You're listening to the Beyond Mommy Dearest podcast, where we talk about growing up with narcissistic moms, how it shapes your nervous system, your relationships, and your sense of self, and how to heal without shame. I'm your host, Nolani Pearl Hernandez. Today's episode is sponsored by The Happy Cannabis, plant-powered body care that actually works. I'm joined by Spiritbird Holden as we talk about intuition, trauma, hypervigilance, and how survivors can reconnect with their inner knowing and rebuild self-trust. Okay. Spiritbird, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate you taking the time to be with me. Can you tell me a little bit in layman's terms what a shaman is and what they focus on?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Shaman, in really broad terms, I think we all have the capacity. It's the part of us that can connect with the unseen or the invisible world. So
Mhm,
that
mhm,
means energy, that means intuition, that means the past and future.
mhm, mhm,
And typically, shamans in a traditional sense are going to work with the invisible realm and especially the spirit realm. There's a big crossover with that and kind of believing that there's a spirit in all things that you can
mhm,
communicate
mhm.
with. And when you're in connection with that, you just get a lot more information about life. So that's a really, really broad explanation of
No,
what
that
they
was
do.
really helpful. One of the things I always tease my husband about, and it's very imminent in our two daughters. So I have a daughter from a previous relationship, and he has his three kids, but his middle daughter and my older daughter are like kindred spirits.
Mm.
Like they like attach really quickly. They kind of like it didn't take much for them to kind of integrate into each other. So I often tell him, I said, I think that we were meant to find each other in this lifetime. And so would that like in a very general sense be that same kind of thought process of, maybe we were spirits in another lifetime and we found each other later this time. We're hopefully going to find each other sooner next time.
Yeah.
So, okay. Okay,
There
cool.
is a crossover, and shamans traditionally they like have a role in the community as being the person that
Mm,
interprets life signals, that keeps the
okay.
community balanced, that
Okay.
does, healing work and that kind of thing. So, but there's a similar vibe, and so a
Mm,
skilled shaman can help kind of usher those moments in
okay.
for you.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Okay, well, can you tell me a little bit about your own early experiences with sensitivity and that spiritual awareness and how they showed up alongside your mental health crisis?
I did. I had a what I would call a mental health crisis in my late teens.
Mhm,
It like built over time,
mhm,
and
mhm,
there was a mixture of unintegrated spiritual gifts, probably
mhm,
some actual like mental imbalances,
mhm,
and like a
mhm,
lot of
mhm,
gray area in between.
mhm,
When I was little, I was probably a very intuitive
mhm,
kid. If I'm sure a lot of people can relate, and people would tell me that they thought I should be a counselor when I was older. I mean, even when I was like 7,
mhm, mhm,
people would come up and tell me things. I would have semi-prophetic dreams where dream something would happen and then tell my mom and then it would happen.
mhm,
And so it was like charming as a kid. I remember
mhm,
talking to
mhm.
trees, all that stuff,
I love
but
it.
it wasn't really, we didn't really think anything of it.
Mhm,
And as I got older, for most kids, that kind of really intuitive stage where, the veil between you and the invisible realms is really,
mhm,
really thin. For most kids, they start to grow out of that. For me,
mhm,
it went the other way. And so I
mhm,
started experiencing seeing spirits in 3D and actually hearing them
mhm,
while I was a teenager.
mhm, mhm,
No context for what was happening. It's a
mhm,
conservative little community that had no
mhm,
language for that. And then mix that with just like a lot of empathy and picking up on stuff that I didn't know wasn't mine.
mhm,
Uh,
mhm,
it led to just really being disoriented, I guess is the lightest, easiest way to say it.
mhm, mhm,
Really overwhelmed, really
mhm,
depressed.
mhm, mhm.
And fortunately, I was able to get some help and support and understanding, what was going on. And that's really where the spiritual gift language was planted.
Mhm,
And that
mhm.
context changed everything for me.
I love that because I think that, one of our past guests, Heather, I was talking to her about when it comes to healing and it comes to trauma, it's like a charcuterie board, right? And you pick the things that work really best for you. And for some people, it might be intensive talk therapy. For some people, it might be this specifically. For some people, it might be a mixture of things. And, we're all about not providing any shame, but really focusing on what works best for you because we care about healing. That's all we care about. When you look back now, what do you understand differently about what was actually happening in your nervous system during that time that you were like trying to figure out what was going on?
You know, something that has become clear to me is how much, when you're a sensitive person, you're picking up on so much information. There's a lot to sort through
Mhm,
internally and externally.
mhm,
And I
mhm,
was trying to make sense of things and emotionally process things that
mhm,
were well
mhm.
beyond my understanding, well beyond my like emotional maturity. And I
Right.
didn't have any, like I say structural support, but I mean like context. There wasn't any like
Yeah.
interpretation, understanding of what is happening.
Right.
And so because there wasn't any context, I was having to be just in overdrive all the time to
Mhm,
function in the
mhm.
ordinary
Oh, wow. Yeah.
reality, you
That's a
know?
lot. And that's a lot for a teenager who doesn't have the words or the context to be able to explain what's going on.
Sure. I mean, and it's a lot for any, I think there's a lot of people that are highly sensitive that wouldn't call
Mhm,
themselves that and
mhm,
don't necessarily recognize. I mean, even I'm 41, and
mhm,
even in
mhm.
the last couple, I've been doing this work for like 20 years. In the last couple of years, I'm still being blown away by how much everybody's, experience is
Mhm,
so different that
mhm.
I didn't realize that people didn't automatically know if somebody's like lying or not, or when somebody's
Right.
being
Right.
inauthentic. I just
Right.
thought everybody knew, you could just
Yeah.
tell. So
Yeah.
when you're
Right.
someone
Yeah.
like that and you're around a bunch of people that aren't acknowledging something that seems really obvious to you, it can
Right.
kind of mess with your mind.
Well, and that's, I always find that really interesting. I call it my narcissist radar, right? I can tell, like, I'm like, boom, that's a narcissist right there. And my husband always laughs, but that's one of the things that really, like, we sat and we talked about at some length because it was something that he was really interested in. And I think for me, and probably a lot of narcissistic daughters of narcissistic mothers probably find that. And oftentimes, and you talked about this veil of between the spirit world and here. And oftentimes what happens is for daughters of narcissistic mothers, they like erase that intuition from them because that's the part that's going to hold them accountable. So they're often told that they're too sensitive, or just ignore that feeling. So how do you understand that sensitivity through the a spiritual and trauma informed lens?
Sensitivity, usually when people say it in a demeaning way, they mean weakness, right?
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
really, it
Mm-hmm.
just means that you're tuned in to
Mm-hmm.
more than the surface level.
Right.
And I think you're so right that it's used a lot of times to separate you from the truth that you're seeing so
Yeah.
that you
Yeah.
can't hold someone accountable.
Mm-hmm.
If you're being, if you're the only one that is in the room and you're being called that, typically I think of it as an opportunity for me to check. If I'm around healthy people
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
somebody says I'm being sensitive, their next
Mm-hmm.
step is going to be to check in on what's going on. I think you're being a little sensitive. Can we actually talk about what you're feeling right now?
Right. Right.
Right? Rather
Right.
than you're being too sensitive and that's the end of the conversation. That's my first signal.
Yeah. Well, it's really interesting that you say that because I think one of the things about our older and middle daughter is that they have that high sensitivity too. We
Mm.
call it they like what they like and that's the way it is. And we're chill with that, right? But when um I remember my older daughter when she would get really overloaded and she would be to the point because she would maybe cry because for her that's her kind of
Mm.
she lets it out that way and then she can process stuff and for her it was always okay, we need to stop whatever we're doing now. I would say in the last 10 years. Before that I was really kind of stuck in my own, like, how do I get out of this hypervigilance? How do I get out of survival mode? And what I found in the last 10 years as I've healed is I too was that sensitive person.
Mhm.
And because, it was squelched all the time, squashed. It was constantly squashed with my mom. And I would say, so I'm a little bit older than you. I'm turning 49 in 6 days. And so I think that one of the things is our generation is definitely, the latchkey generation, get over your feelings, move forward generation, which I understand to a point. And the point is like when, your child or a person is like at that point where they vocalize it, I think the vocalization is a really key. And how can, as we talk about this, how can someone distinguish between, that true intuition and that trauma-based hypervigilance? Because I think that's where a lot of narcissistic mothers take advantage of their daughters.
Absolutely. I want to name also that I think this is part of the trap
Hmm.
around
Hmm.
that sensitivity and being aware means
Hmm.
that we're also seeing when somebody's kind of like abusing it on the other side of it. When you see
Yes.
somebody have a fit because they know it'll make people do what they want them to do,
Yes. So
or,
I think there's
manipulating a
two, right?
situation through their emotions, right? So really
Right.
sensitive people see that, also know that that doesn't feel good, and then can
Yes.
often feel like when they're emotionally expressing that they are that they're
Oh my
bad.
God. Thank you so much for naming that because that's something that it's really hard because it's like you want to say, I'm sorry that you experienced this as someone who's a survivor, but there are people who take advantage of that. So I appreciate you saying that because then there's the other side, the flip side, right? That someone who's so sensitive doesn't want to be viewed as someone who's taking it. It's like this ugly circle. So thank you for naming that. I think that is something that's really important that as we go through this.
And
So
that's
how
part
do
of
you,
the hypervigilance because there's two
yes,
different
yeah,
sides. There's
yeah.
the constantly scanning
Mm-hmm.
for what's happening to try to prevent, a fallout or a
Mm-hmm.
disaster or some terrible
Mm-hmm.
situation.
Yeah, yeah,
And then there's the hypervigilance internally, where you're
yes,
constantly scanning and monitoring yourself, making sure you're doing the right thing, being good,
yes,
all of that stuff.
yes, yes. It's really interesting. I've named this a couple times. There is this show that my husband and I watched called Real Trent. I love crime shows. Like, I don't know why. I'm a sucker for like a glutton for punishment. Like I love crime shows. So this is actually really good. Will has gone through his own trauma and there's a detective who's searching for her mother who is kidnapped. And her mother was hard on her. I'm not going to attempt to diagnose if her mother was anything else, but the voice in her head was her mother. And it was like, you're not going to be able to find me. Don't do this, blah, blah, blah. Like all these horrible thoughts. And my husband like paused it because he was watching it and he said to me, is this what it sounds like in your head? And I said, like by 1,000.
Yeah.
And he's like, that's not what it sounds like in my head. I was like, that's because you had a wonderful, healthy childhood. That's totally cool. And I appreciate that because you know exactly what I need. So um, I think that one of the things in my experience that gets overlooked when we talk about that survivor hypervigilance is not only, like you said, the scanning, but the internal dialogue that is like we're constantly talking to ourselves to say, okay, is it this time? Should we say something now? What's going on? Oh my gosh, I'm being too extra. It's constant. So I appreciate you bringing that forward.
Yeah.
Another thing that survivors often talk about is they grew up walking on eggshells.
Mhm.
And so, how does that constant scanning, like we were just talking for other emotions, often get mislabeled again as that intuition
Mhm.
of feeling like there's something off? Or do they go hand in hand? Or could they go hand in hand?
I mean, they kind of do. I think, first of all, when we're talking about intuition and spiritual gifts
Mhm.
or whatever you want to label them as, like, extra senses, we
Mhm.
all
Mhm.
have them.
Mhm. Mhm.
You don't have to go through a traumatic experience to be able
Mhm.
to or to want to scan ahead of time. I mean, it's just natural human nature to want to predict what's going to happen for the best outcome,
Right.
you
Right.
know?
Exactly.
So, but I think in general that like hypervigilance, that's I tune into a feeling more than anything.
Mm-hmm.
So the hypervigilance and intuition are both pattern recognition, but
Hmm.
hypervigilance tends to rely on like physical, subtle, very subtle, but physical clues like tone, like body
Hmm.
posture, habits of a person or a situation.
Hmm.
And usually they don't feel good too. When you're scanning
Hmm.
for them, you're going to
Hmm.
feel tension. Even what we were saying with that hypervigilance and like
Right.
hearing the voice, the voices, but it sounds like your voice talking to you.
Right.
In my work, that's part of telepathy, and a lot of kids
Oh
actually
yeah.
hear the way their parents talk to themselves. You hear how your
Yeah.
mother
Yeah.
is talking to
Yeah.
herself,
Yeah.
and you can't
Yeah.
distinguish between the
Right.
fact that it's her voice and your voice. So you have her voice
That's
literally in
so
your
interesting.
head,
That's so
not knowing.
interesting. That's interesting.
And you might
Yeah.
also mislabel that as intuition.
Right. Right.
But
I could
if
see
it
that.
basically rule, if it doesn't feel good, it's not intuition.
That makes
Now,
sense.
you can be challenged, and
Right.
like you can be invited to do things that are scary to you, but it's very
Hmm.
much a body thing.
So
So
it's
that's
like
really what
all
I
your
would,
senses are like on overload. You're like, okay, I'm intuition, like, well, for me, what and you tell me, like maybe this might help. Like you tell me when I have an intuition on something, like let's say I'm not going to go down that road because I'm worried that there might be an accident or maybe I'm seeing something or that kind of thing. What happens for me is I get this flood of overwhelm of, okay, this is weird. And I'm having this flood of overwhelm. And then, like, my nervous system starts going haywire, basically. Like, I might start sweating and I might like start to get a little bit nervous. And then I'm like, okay, maybe I shouldn't go that way. And then something might happen. That's the way I've felt it in the past.
yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, listening to those body clues, I think is huge. That makes a
Right.
big difference for sure.
Right. That's really helpful.
A lot of
And
times
I never,
intuition isn't explainable too, It's like if
right.
you're
Right.
actually this is a great example. I remember when I was a kid, before my dad if he was thinking about something he was going to say, I'd often hear
Hmm.
him do the thing where he'd take a couple like breaths right before he was about to start
Right.
talking, but then he
Hmm.
wouldn't talk. So I'd be like,
Hmm.
"What, Dad?"
Right. Right.
And he'd be like,
Yeah.
"How did you know I was going to say something?" Like that was like the hypervigilance. It's like because I
Right.
heard you
Yeah.
do the
Hmm.
breath.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
Very different than I was traveling and I bought a charm for my dad and it was an eagle and it happened to be the same like week he had an experience with an eagle
Oh, so
and we weren't near
interesting.
each other at all, right?
Yeah. It's really interesting. My dad talked about this. My dad was in the Navy. My dad was not the abuser in this whole situation. My mom was. And my poor dad just got wrecked by my mom. And so he was talking about he was in the Navy and it was at the end or towards the end of the Vietnam War. And he was really close with his mom. And he told me about like this experience that he had. And my grandmother on another time told me about feeling something but not knowing what the experience was. Like he felt like there was something that my dad, like something was going on, and they ended up, like, I guess my dad called her the next day and she's like, "Oh, I was thinking about yesterday." He's like, "I had a whole conversation with you yesterday." And so it was interesting to see that, and them at different times, not at all like asked about, gave that information. So
Oh, yeah.
yeah, it's just interesting. And I, like you said, I think each person probably has this and probably like just pushes it away.
Yeah.
And because especially in our Western society, it's not something that you really talk about, right? It's not something that you give. And I definitely think that energy is a really important thing for you to pay attention to. And this might help. So, what are some signs that a person's spiritual experiences may be intertwined with maybe some unhealed trauma that they have experienced?
Sure. So if you're in that spot where you're starting to notice some things, trying to trust yourself again, trying to
Mhm.
understand the context for what's
Mhm.
happening, there can be a lot of entanglement here, and then there can be a lot of confusion because most people are reaching out in a bunch of different places to get some information.
Mhm.
And so it can be really confusing because there's lots of contradictory things out there. But I almost always come back to the body.
Hmm.
So when you're trying to distinguish between the two, well, one, I think of that hypervigilance or kind of like reacting from like the wound it from your wound is going to be
Hmm.
more focused on trying to prevent something from happening. Like, of course,
Right.
we want to be smart about things, but that's like, and if you just think about when you're worried about something, you probably can immediately just notice how that feels in your body.
Hmm.
So if you're making decisions or interpreting life's message with that feeling in your body of like, I'm trying to prevent something bad from happening,
Hmm.
then that's part of the unhealed trauma. Versus if you're listening from, I'm trying to understand something.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
And then usually that's not going to feel quite as intense in the body. It's not going to require this like the unhealed trauma will like push urgency. Like I need to make a decision right now.
Oh,
It'll make
no.
things feel like everything's like a life and death situation. Everything's really
Yes.
dramatic.
That,
Um,
yes.
it might make you feel that relation, especially if you're trying to date or something, that you might think
Hmm.
that intensity is required for you to believe that there's passion and love
That's
rather
really,
than,
yeah,
go ahead,
yeah.
go ahead.
No, I was going to say that's really interesting that you bring that up because a lot of the women that I see who had narcissistic mothers like feel as if that is something that's needed. And then their first relationship is that unhealthy narcissistic relationship. I find that really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it's all around us too. I mean, not only between you and your mother, because
Hmm.
you would
Hmm.
have that whiplash
Yeah.
experience,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's also kind of demonstrated in media. And likely if your mother, especially if
Oh
your
my God.
mother was single or dating, then she
Yeah. Yeah.
probably
Yeah.
dated like
Yeah.
that. And you
Yeah.
get this
Yeah.
picture that for romantic relationships, it's got to be this big, giant thing for it to be
Yeah.
real. And usually those are actually the first signs that something toxic is brewing.
I know. I always find that really interesting. Here's my my on what goes on in like the teenage like promposals. Have you seen those?
Yeah, yeah.
I'm
Okay.
like, bro. Like we have some of our kids are teenagers. So we have a 17 and 14-year-old and then our older kids who are 30 and 24. Every time I see a promposal, I'm like, oh, I just want to like, I'm like, that's not real life. Like real life doesn't look like this. It's not like
Right.
our wedding proposals aren't like this big, like, oh my God, I can't believe all this stuff happened. Our weddings aren't like that, right?
Right.
And I have to agree with you when it comes to like the media or like what is it? The say yes to the dress or any of those things. We sensationalize things that are not okay. Right. And I think, with plastic surgery and, the Kardashians and all that stuff, I'm like, that's not what people really look like. It just isn't. So I really appreciate you calling that out. And I think a lot of it has to do with that narcissism, right? Right. It's something that it's it's crazy. And I really like I was drawn to your feed because of the work that you do in that narcissism realm
Hmm.
where you talk a lot about that. And I I would love for you to kind of dig into like how do you see like that spiritual bypassing show up in the healing communities, especially for people with that complex childhood trauma or the narcissistic trauma?
Yeah. And so it can sneak in there.
Hmm.
Naturally, when we think about spiritual growth,
Hmm.
the you might think of the words like awakening or
Hmm.
ascending or high
Hmm.
vibe first.
Hmm.
I don't, I was about to say I don't really know how that got in the mix, but I do. And I think where we can get mixed up is for non-religious spiritual work, it is
Hmm.
not the same as a Christian context or
Oh,
an
that's helpful.
Abrahamic
Yeah.
religious context.
Hmm.
But a lot of times, if you grew up with that religious context, you actually transfer those beliefs over into
Hmm.
the non-religious spiritual world. So you
Hmm.
can still be like, oh, I would be rewarded if I'm good and I'm punished if I'm bad. And in
Hmm.
spiritual work, that's not how this works. In spiritual work, it's
Okay.
more focused on, freeing you from from illusions, from things that aren't the truth, and seeing more, seeing what you didn't see before, and letting the experience that you're having through, let it be the experience that you're having.
Yeah.
So one of the big places is this idea of sending or awakening. It can get you can end up pushing down being angry. You can push down being upset or frustrated. There's a
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
big confusion between or a commonality between unhealed trauma, spiritual bypassing, and then confusing like lack of boundaries for oneness
Okay. Mm-hmm.
or
Mm-hmm.
helping. Like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
well, we're all one, so that means I don't have to, it's wrong for me to take care of myself or
Mm-hmm.
defend my
Mm-hmm.
time or stand
Mm-hmm.
up for myself.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
that can get distorted. And I also see it where people, you know, you definitely can be mistreated and need to name it when that's happening, but I see spiritual bypassing coming on the other side where there's this constant like blame game where like, well,
Yeah.
I'm sensitive and I have light and you feel bad to me, you're spiritually attacking me.
Mm-hmm. 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 Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
that is actually a bit bypass on the other end of the
Mm-hmm.
bypassing
Mm-hmm.
spectrum, I guess I
Yeah.
would say.
Yeah, and I think like most things, we can talk about religion being misused. We could talk about spirituality being misused. We could talk about just about anything being misused. So there's always on one side or another, or people using it against you, right? Like just saying the words, I'm too sensitive, people using that against you and saying, oh, well, you're too sensitive. This is too sensitive. Oh, we can't do that. You're too sensitive. So I really appreciate you naming that, and I like the objectiveness of the two sides. I appreciate that. One of the things that a phrase that is often used, I think that it's probably misused too, is love and light. Right? Like we see that all the time. We see shirts with love and light on it, and blah blah blah. And our people will say that. So tell me first, I think what love and light is in spirituality, and why is love and light only spirituality often unsafe for survivors?
I I would say it's unsafe. Love and light only is unsafe for anyone. I
Hmm.
pretty much never hear this phrase from actually integrated, mature spiritual people.
That's fair. Yeah.
People that are grounded and understand, and have a connection to themselves, connection to the world around them,
Yeah.
never
Yeah.
say that.
Right.
I mean, there's love. Love to me, love is seeing and understanding that people have different paths, they have different
Hmm.
wiring, they have
Hmm.
different
Hmm. Hmm.
purpose than you,
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
they have a different life perspective, and you can understand or have compassion for their perspective.
Hmm. Hmm.
But it comes with boundaries. And it
Hmm.
comes with recognizing that you also have
Hmm.
wounds and distortions. And
Hmm.
so if you want to truly be light, you need to explore those too.
Hmm. Hmm.
And the
Hmm.
first step, really, especially if you've been through a whole childhood of
Hmm.
really
Hmm.
confusing traumatic situations like that, there is a first step, which is you've got to first just acknowledge that was messed up what happened to you.
Yes.
Like that was
Yes.
wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the next step is usually, well, I'm not to blame, but what did I
Right.
learn here?
Right.
What was this
Right.
trying to show me? And then you got
Right.
to integrate that.
Right. And you talked about, or you mentioned, you touched on that, grounding integration. So can you tell us what that really means in practical everyday terms? Because you mentioned it again, is like what's really grounding, like so that we can get a taste of like how this might look like in our everyday world. And then maybe some people, survivors, are already doing it without even knowing.
I bet they are. Yeah. I
Hmm.
mean, I think really, really simply, grounded integration, it's just you changing your daily habits. You're
Mm-hmm.
pausing before answering out of habit. If you felt as a child like you always had to say yes and help somebody out and put yourself
Hmm.
last,
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
integration of that is when somebody asks you to do a favor, you pause and check to see if you actually want to do it or not.
Mm, mhm, mhm, mhm,
Taking breaks during the day,
mhm,
doing the things you've been avoiding
mhm,
doing your
mhm,
whole life,
mhm,
that's integration. We talked about the relationship habit of feeling like things need to be really intense for it to be real. And so if
mhm,
you've gone through a situation, say you've dated six people like that, and it's turned
Hmm.
out bad every time. Integration would be the next time you meet someone and you have that same feeling, you pause.
Right. Right. It's really interesting. One of the things that I have developed in my 40s and started developing in my 30s was I always wanted to fight. When there was some kind of injustice, I was like, I wish you would just push me. Come on, do it, push me so I can let you have it. Right.
I'd love to tell you
And
what's on my mind.
yeah, and it's constant. And I very rarely get to that point anymore because that pause is there now. Or maybe I might get there and I'm like starting to write it, maybe some, internet troll or whatever, and I'm starting to write it. And then I write it and I'm like, this is really not worth what is going to come after and after and after. I'm done. I'm like, and so that I think that sense of peace is really what a lot of survivors are looking for. And where I find a lot of the women that I work with, where maybe they're still interfacing with their moms. Like I've been no contact for 10 years. My mom has no reason, no like earthly idea of why I don't ever call her and talk to her. She leaves a tons of messages, but I don't like for me personally, and for each person it's different. For me personally, I don't need to explain to her. She knows what she did.
Yeah.
I don't need to explain the abuse that happened. And if she doesn't know, then she's really fucked up. I can't express that anymore. And so, but some women, feel that guilt, or maybe they feel like they need to like still be in contact with their mom. And so I don't fault them. We're all each on our own kind of healing journeys. And one of the things I think for me that really kind of the nail in the coffin for me was how badly my mom gaslit me and made me question all of everything that I was feeling. And I think for a lot of daughters and narcissistic mothers, they are deeply gaslit about their reality. Like I have my little worry stone. I'd be like, okay, this is great. And she'd be like, no, that's totally purple. And I'm like, it's not. And it seems crazy when we talk about gaslighting that it could be that simple. And it is. George Orwell talked about it in his books, 1984, where he talked about newspeak and like the changing in in the way we get our news. So how does someone like begin to rebuild that trust in their selves of his knowing when we're like surrounded by it every day?
It's so hard. Oh, and I really want to commend you, the example you just gave. Like those might feel insignificant, and maybe listeners
Mhm,
might
mhm,
have moments like that too and feel like they're not healed, but it's like those moments, that's what
mhm.
it's all about.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
really, and it's really big work when you
Oh
can
yeah.
get to that place.
Yeah, anytime that I'm not telling somebody off, that's a big that's a big celebration, right? Like, we talk about it all the time, and I have my little like, my little Mac things where like if I do certain motions, I'm like, okay, this is a celebration when it comes to this, but it really is like I can't tell you for a lot of narcissistic women, for women of narcissistic abuse, justice and lying, like those things are big on their like. If I could be a vigilante and be like Batman, if that was really real, I totally would do that because it's so like that to me is maddening.
Mhm.
And so any moment that I can say, let's pause and not do that.
Yeah.
Or, no, what you're telling me is this is not purple. This is gray. I see it. This is not broken. That's a huge thing. So I appreciate that.
And I
And
definitely, oh, go
yeah,
ahead.
go ahead. No, 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 go, go,
Well, and
go.
I definitely want to get to your question on how do you
Yeah,
rebuild the trust, but I got to
yeah,
pause here too because I work with like a archetypal wiring system. Like we're
yeah,
all
yeah,
wired in
yeah,
different
yeah,
ways.
yeah,
And
yeah,
it's interesting that you say the justice piece because
yeah.
typically each person has like a major trigger
Hmm.
point
Yep.
that's part of their gifts, but also
Yeah,
again, it
yeah,
can be part of the wound.
yeah,
So if you're acting from that place, it tends to make your life very chaotic. But if you're
yeah,
acting
yeah,
from that place of the healed and the gifts,
yeah,
then
yeah.
things tend to work out a little bit better for
Yeah,
you.
if I was like Batman all the time, it would be
Yeah.
crazy and chaotic. I would be like, "Peace out, everyone. I'm going. Gotta go take care of stuff." But it's definitely like
Yeah.
Can you imagine like a healed Batman from all of his like childhood traumas, like how he would be able to like, really change the world instead of just going out there and causing chaos everywhere? And so that I love that. I love the I love the call out of, this is where a lot of it comes from, like where that justice really comes
Yeah,
from.
and
So I
so
appreciate
for
that.
some people the trigger is justice. For other people, you asked about bypassing, and some
Yeah.
people the bypass is disassociating. It's like, well,
Yeah.
actually your gift is that you can connect to other realms and
Yeah.
other worlds. But if
Yeah.
you're in your wound, you're going to disassociate, and if you're getting into a place where you're in like a negative environment, then you're going to confuse that disassociation as being something that's good.
That's really interesting. Thank you for calling that out. And we'll put little notes so you can get to Spirit Bird's information on this, so you can like read a little bit more. She's got this
Oh,
great
sure.
blog.
Yeah.
She's got a great podcast that she does. So you can dabble into and possibly work with her. So I appreciate that. So
But
tell
your
me about this.
question was,
Yeah,
yeah, trust,
trust.
trust.
Yeah,
Again, I'm a body person, and you mentioned that earlier. Is like when you would be like, "This is purple," and your mom would say, "No, that's gray,"
yeah,
uh,
yeah,
or
yeah, yeah,
whichever way that
yeah,
was.
yeah. No, no, no.
It's
Right.
like from
Yeah.
when you're around people that gaslight and from people that manipulate or narcissists, like
Hmm.
that is their point. Like they can't wait. This is actually one of the wiring mechanisms that I talk about too, but
Right.
they actually are trying to get you into a spot where you can argue so
Hmm.
they can make sure they're on the right side of the argument.
Right.
So you've learned that trick, which is why you don't engage with your mom
Right.
anymore on like,
Yep.
why, what's wrong, right?
Ugh,
So
barf. Yeah.
you
Sorry.
but just listening to your body. So instead of
Yeah.
asking, was I right? We're trying to prove things to yourself.
Right.
Just ask, what did I feel? My
I love that.
when this thing happened, my chest got tight, or my stomach
Right.
dropped, or I
Right.
felt confused suddenly, right?
Right.
Like
Right.
name those things, name almost being more broad, like something feels off.
Right. Right. Well,
Because
like I said, barf, like when I start to feel that way, I'm like, ugh, barf. Like, no, thank you.
yeah.
That makes sense. I love that. You know, let's build on this a little bit, the self-trust. So what does it look like when that self-trust is embodied rather than performative?
Now, I think that's easy. I think there's not a need to explain or prove.
Hmm. Hmm.
I think it's
Hmm.
just simple.
Right. And what I see a lot of daughters of narcissistic mothers do is there's that constant need to explain themselves because they've been gaslit for so long. So it's like this like constant like machine of just abuse. And then at the end of it, they're like, oftentimes I will get a message and it'll be like, I tried to talk to my mom and I'm so exhausted. I'm like, okay, first thing you got to ground yourself, like go do something, like wash it out of your brain, and then we'll address the issue. Because I think that is like that's the sweet spot, right? And I think for us, like right now, everything that's going on, what we're seeing is it's constant, just a constant, even without all the news, excuse me, just like the social media aspect of it, right?
Yeah.
There is, I don't know why it took, what is it, 10 years for them to figure out that being constantly bombarded by this stuff was going to be an issue, which brings me to, I think they already knew, they were just trying to figure out how to make money on it. But like, we're seeing what a huge difference it is with kids that are growing up in this constantly.
Mhm.
And I find it really, really interesting. In fact, I saw a friend recently. Um, she just had a landline installed. Like she has
Wow.
kind of checked out of everything. And the best part of the landline is it. Do you remember the clear phones that
The
everybody
coolest
wanted?
phones,
Yeah,
yes.
the coolest phones ever. She put it up on. I was like, that's so cool. Like and so she got it, and her little boys, um, they're not on social media. All of our kids, when they're with us, weren't able to be on social media like at a certain age because it reprograms a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And if there are any insecurities or questions in your self trust or any of those things, it just builds on that.
Yeah.
Um, how can survivors honor that spiritual curiosity with abandoning their emotional needs?
Definitely don't bypass yourself in the name of rescuing or saving other people.
Hmm. 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 Hmm.
Don't bypass yourself in the name of growth.
Hmm.
Like a lot of times, I mean, obviously growth is great, but pushing like that, forcing yourself into it is a lot of how we lose our, our sever our distrust even more.
Hmm.
I definitely think that there's when you're examining yourself, don't make it like cut and dry. If
Hmm.
you're
Hmm.
checking, trying to test yourself, test your curiosity, keep it open. So
Hmm.
if you're asking yourself, is this true or did I get it right? You're going to start evaluating yourself from this really rigid standpoint.
Hmm. Hmm.
That's
Hmm.
it is not the full picture yet.
Right.
Actually, like this just
Right.
happened to me today. I had two group gatherings that were coming up. I just had kind of seeded them a couple months ago. I hadn't really promoted them. I was going to send out a reminder today that was a little bit more forward facing. And
Right.
last minute, I was like, I keep getting this feeling that I actually want to switch the dates on one of these.
Mm-hmm. Hmm.
And then what happened is I was like, oh, I hate to switch things on people, but nobody
Yeah.
signed up. Nobody, I haven't really done a lot with
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I decided to go ahead and follow that and do that. And
Right.
then immediately after that happened, of course, immediately after that, nobody said anything before, but once I changed it, somebody immediately was like, "Oh, I was going to come and now I can't." If my mind would have been like, "Oh, I did the wrong thing,"
Right. Right.
I
Right.
would have just I would have um rooted more into that distrust.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
some of that
Yeah.
came from my decision came from my own intuition and my own emotional needs.
Right. Right.
And actually, what happened right after that, it was just like, oh no, I had that immediate reaction of like, oh, did I like misread the signal? Was I doing the wrong
Right.
thing?
Hmm.
And I
Hmm.
was like, oh, but she also asked about doing a private event.
Right. So that worked
Like,
out.
so
Yeah.
I can't even say that it didn't work out yet.
Right. Right.
So
Right.
anyway, I would say don't evaluate yourself and your decisions that much, that
Right.
harshly.
Right.
Keep following your
Right.
intuition, keep following your emotional needs. And then I think the other thing is if you really want to honor your spiritual curiosity,
Hmm.
you should feel challenged.
Hmm.
And I don't think
Hmm.
people talk about this a lot. If you're in
Hmm.
a spiritual community at all, a
Hmm.
healthy
Hmm.
spiritual environment doesn't just soothe you, it's going to confront you. And if you're
Hmm.
around people that only affirm you, you are in an unhealthy place.
I would say that was probably an AI relationship. That's the way that I feel about AI.
Oh, how brilliant you are.
Yeah. I am like Albert Einstein to AI, right? Because it's like you said, it's an unhealthy like relationship basically because you know I have a real, my husband's amazing. And I don't say that because he's downstairs working. I say that because I do honestly believe that because we are supportive and all that stuff. But when there is something that each other maybe is like not right, or we're not like headed down the right path, or maybe a great example of that is when I was doing our first conference for the Mommy Dearest virtual conference. He's like, I know that you scheduled it on a time that we don't have the kids, and that's on Wednesdays, but Wednesdays probably aren't the best time because people aren't going to come. You should schedule it on a weekend. And I was like, no, well, because I was worried about the kids. And then I sat and I was like, oh, he's definitely right. And more people. So I did the same thing. I switched the day. I was like, hey, I know that this is the day. If you can't make it on this weekend, I totally understand, but we're recording it. And we had more people attend as a result of that who said exactly what he said. I was going to come, but, it was on a Wednesday. So, um, all those things. And I was just thinking about my daughter, and she just text messaged me. It's so funny. This is the intuition thing or that connection thing, because whenever I think about them, They always, and especially my older daughter, I'll think about her and then boom, she'll text message me. So it's really
Mhm.
interesting. I want to dig in a little bit about the work that you do or the stuff that you talk about in regards to narcissism. So, what kind of brought you to really focusing some of your social medias or some of the help that you have in regards to narcissism? Was there something that you experienced, or do you just see it out everywhere?
To be totally transparent, a little bit of both. I
Hmm.
see it
Hmm.
out there. I became more acquainted with it, honestly, from working with people that are more on the empath end of the spectrum and end up in that empath narcissist
Hmm.
relationship.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
there are some wounds there too. I mean,
Hmm.
I say this with love because it is not an easy thing to go through. It definitely messes you up. There's a lot to untangle, to trust yourself
Hmm.
again. All of that stuff is serious, serious work. And a lot of people that I worked with originally, could only see that they were kind of this holier than thou, and the other
Hmm.
people were bad.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I felt like it was helpful to start really zeroing in on those, like the particular things that happen
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
help you see that it's not just like everybody has an ego, everybody wants
Yeah,
to be
yeah,
right, everybody wants
yeah,
to get
of
their
course.
way.
Yeah,
There's a difference between somebody who's maybe kind of a bully or like puts on a lot of
right,
pressure and you don't have
right,
any boundaries, and someone
right,
who's actually
right.
like deeply narcissistic.
Yeah, absolutely. Tell me about this empath narcissist, like our empath and narcissist, not the two combined,
Sure, sure, sure.
and how they end up, how this relationship, or how it's more common you see this with people who are empaths end up in a narcissistic relationship.
You see it more in romantic relationships.
Hmm.
When
Hmm.
we're talking about parents and child, then we're gonna get a little bit more
Hmm.
meta
Hmm.
on
Yeah.
like soul contracts and whether or not you believe and that kind of thing. So
Yeah,
if you
yeah,
think you
yeah.
came here to learn certain lessons, then that might be
Right.
part of it. But again, if that's not something you buy into, you got to trust your body on
Yeah,
what
yeah,
feels true for
yeah.
you.
Definitely.
But typically for folks that are highly sensitive, they also tend to be very empathic. And what that means for most people when it's unintegrated, when they're moving from the kind of wounded version, is
Hmm.
that there's a lot of self-sacrifice that happens for them.
Hmm.
There's a lot of
Yes.
put other people ahead, trust other
Hmm.
people more than
Hmm.
yourself.
Hmm.
And again, if you grew up in that environment, then that was manipulated into you. It's not
Hmm.
your fault,
Hmm.
is not what
Hmm.
I'm saying. And that's part of the lesson. When it comes to
Right.
romantic relationships, often this happens too. And where I see people get stuck is again, you've got to know that it's not you, for the love of God, even though it
Yeah, yeah,
feels like
no.
it is,
Yeah.
and you care about yourself and you're so conscious of people that you'll always think it's your fault and it's not.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then there's that step past it, which is like, what was I reinforcing in the situation?
Yep.
And trying to prove
Well,
yourself, not believing yourself,
yep.
not standing up
Hmm.
for yourself, all of
Hmm.
those
Hmm.
things
Hmm. Hmm.
demonstrate to the narcissist why they should stay being that way because they
Right.
witness you in what they see as being weakness, and that
Hmm.
affirms for them that they would never want to be emotionally open because
Yes.
your version is like, oh, I don't want to be one of those selfish people that manipulates
Hmm.
people, so I'm always going to overgive. And their version is the exact opposite. I don't want to be one of
It's
those people
it's
gets
really
taken advantage of.
interesting. Absolutely. And I think that people tend to forget that we as human beings can have two complex thoughts at one time.
Yes.
So, number one, you can
Yes.
be, I definitely want to not take advantage of someone. Complex thought.
Hmm.
And somebody could be taking advantage of you too. And assessing that to say, okay, I don't want to be that person. I want to please people. For me, I'm definitely a giver in regard to that. And I need to also take care of myself because we always talk about it. If I go down, like if my husband goes down, we all go down, right? Well, if that kind of thing happens, and being able to understand it's not either or, it's two complex thoughts. And I think that's really, really important for people to understand. And once I started thinking about that and pausing and saying, I think this, and
Hmm.
And knowing that, that's a really, really important thing. Um, Tell me, what does grounded spiritual practice actually support in daily life?
Again, that's just the habit change. Grounded
Mm-hmm,
spiritual practice means you have context for
hmm
what's happening and what needs to be different for you to be living the way you want to be living,
hmm
right?
hmm
The
hmm
pause before you answer,
hmm hmm
the checking in with yourself.
hmm
So it's a combination of those moments where you're actively, little by little, doing those things that make your life actually be different.
hmm
And I think grounded spiritual practice is also that you have a sense of how to interpret life's messages that
hmm
feels clear and aligned for you.
hmm Well, I think a lot of people, like, let's think of it in layman's terms. A lot of, so we deal with leaderships, or people who are leaders in nonprofits, and they often say, I was called to the work.
Hmm.
I have a calling to this work. I think that is really like they're feeling some kind of thing that they're doing this work, and then on a daily basis that's kind of triggered for them, because and they might not know that they're doing this spiritual practice, or they're working in their that spiritual grounding all the time, but their work really centers around that. Or like for me, I found it was it worked together with the work that I was doing with the narcissistic recovery abuse, um or narcissistic abuse recovery. That work that I do kind of goes hand in hand with the work that we also do with leaders, because oftentimes there's a lot of like imposter syndrome that's going on with them,
Hmm.
and they feel like they're, not kind of doing the like what they should be doing. So that grounding is a really important part for us when we're working with people. How can survivors um, create safety in that spiritual exploration as they're looking to kind of delve deeper into the work that you do?
Hmm. I always come back to the body and feeling, definitely be paying attention to what your
Mhm,
signals are because they're different for
mhm.
everybody. Pay attention to
Yep.
those.
Hmm hmm
And I love balance, curiosity, the combination of curiosity and knowing.
hmm hmm
Um, it's like if you are jumping to conclusions on things, if you're like, okay, I know it, it's intuition, I got the message, I know, and you never question, that's a red
hmm
flag.
Right.
And so get curious. Well, what are some other options here? What are some other beliefs or
hmm
experiences that I might have had? And check into those. And on the flip
hmm
side, if you're always kind of questioning, what about this? What about
hmm
this? What about that? That's
Right.
also a red flag to start trusting
Right.
those first things that come through. And intuition is almost always the first thought, almost always the first
Yep.
signal. If you,
Yep.
s- I mean, I can't think of many times that it fails. The only
Yep.
time it fails is when you disregard it and you pick the
Yep.
second one and pretend that
Yeah.
you thought that was the first one.
And that comes like in real time. It's usually, I knew I should have done that.
Yeah,
Like if you're
totally.
saying
I
that,
didn't know first.
I knew I should have done that first. Like, or those types of reactions are that you're ignoring your body sensations, your intuition, all of those things. So
Yes.
I know for a fact. How about this? I'm going to say this really solidly. I know for a fact everyone who is listening and who will listen has at least once in their life said, I know I should have done that. I should have done that other thing, or I should have picked that other thing. So your intuition is working, just so everyone knows.
Yeah. So take that as a win that you
Yeah.
did recognize and not as a
Yes.
way to punish yourself for not doing the thing.
Yes. Yes. You're not in trouble. It's a
Right.
win. And you're recognizing it. If
Yes.
someone feels, called to this deeper spiritual work, but is a little bit scared about maybe losing control, what would you want them to know?
I want to name one of the questions. This might not be related to this specifically, but
Yeah. Yeah.
when we talk about spiritual gifts and that could
hmm
get into like spirits and that kind of thing,
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
lot of
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
have fear around like negative spirits
Yes.
entering their
Yes.
life. This
hmm
is not the most like glamorous thing to say, But I just want to name that pretending that your gifts aren't there doesn't protect you from those things.
Yes, 100%.
It's just like boundaries, not having boundaries.
Yeah,
Just
yeah, yeah, yeah,
so
yeah.
and
That
I
makes
also want to
sense.
name that, being concerned about losing control, like it is a legitimate fear.
Hmm,
Uh,
hmm.
it's not wrong to be concerned about that. I think it's a good thing if if you can recognize and just name that for yourself.
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah.
also for people, especially with a big history of trauma,
Hmm,
control is what kept you safe in those
hmm,
moments,
hmm,
especially if you were young, where you
hmm,
didn't
hmm,
actually get to have control. So
hmm,
having to get control internally
hmm,
was how you
hmm,
did that.
hmm,
And at some point, your nervous system,
hmm.
your body, everything is going to start to or stay in overdrive, and it's going to
Hmm.
start toppling in on itself, and that control is going to feel like a trap.
Right, right.
So it's not really about, blowing up your life or blowing up your psyche or,
Hmm, hmm.
like a big giant
Right.
experience that drastically changes.
Hmm.
It's more like your freedom comes from, in those moments, being able to choose the thing that's right for you instead of the thing that you're afraid of.
Right,
And to me,
right.
that's what it's really
Hmm,
about. That's what letting go, it's almost counterintuitive, but that's what letting go of control
hmm,
is like
hmm,
trusting. Is That's all
hmm.
it is. It's just trusting what's really true for you.
I think that's really beautiful because oftentimes, especially people who have experienced trauma, especially people who've experienced this kind of trauma, that losing control is a lot of fear. But what happens if this goes on, or what happens if happens? And I attribute my what happens if, like, disappearing to my older daughter, because it was like never a question of are we going to survive, it's we are going to survive, and how are we going to survive things. She was really little. I think I lived with my mom for a very brief period of time, and I was like, nope, we're not doing this. This is not happening. I'm good. We're out of here. And for me, being as young as I was when I had her, like, I was like, how am I going to do this? I'm just a baby still myself. What is going to go on? How are we going to do it? And there was never a question that if we're going to make it, it is a question of when we're going to make it. And I think for her, one of the things that's something she always looks to me for. Like, she often messages me, I need to talk to you about something. I just need you to tell me it's going to be okay. And I'm like, okay. She's all, you don't need to say anything else. I just need that. And that is something that I think is really important, like in a healthy relationship. Like, we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. Not a big deal. We'll figure it out. And, you know, that has taken me time in my own healing journey to figure out that that is a really important part. So tell me, for your own healing, you've been doing this for 20 years. Um, it's so crazy. Like, I feel like I'm still like 20 years old. How could I ever be doing anything for 20 years? Right?
I had a friend that
Like,
she's like, it's going to be 20 years in like next month. I was like, what?
I know, like, we totally just fangirled over the same thing, like the clear phone. We're like, yeah, of course, that was the dope phone, right? So, and that was like 20 years ago. It kills me. So tell me, what does healing look like for you now compared to really early on in your journey when you started?
What a great question. When I started, I did not even have the context of healing.
Hmm, hmm,
And I think that that is something that I'd like to promote more.
hmm, hmm.
Healing is super important. I do it. I do
Yeah,
healing work with people.
yeah.
It's really about recognizing where things came from, changing the pattern, right?
Hmm,
And
hmm.
then implementing it in your life so your life is so you feel good in your life.
Yeah.
When I started, I wasn't even thinking to myself, "Oh, I'm healing. I'm on a healing journey right now."
Right,
It was 20
right.
years ago. We didn't have those
Yeah,
words yet,
yeah. Nope,
really.
we did not.
I just knew that when I did intuitive work and when I learned more about those skills and learned more about spirituality, that I felt excited
Hmm,
and
hmm.
alive. And the more I did it, the more I got to trust myself.
I love that. Well, and I'm so glad that you found this work because I wouldn't be talking with you today. So everything happens for a reason.
Yes.
What I would love as we close, close this up is what message would you offer to a daughter who feels like she's just kind of at this beginning work, or maybe she's in the middle and she feels broken and overwhelmed and maybe too much? What message would you like for her to carry as she, continues on her healing journey?
Yeah. The most important thing, if you're right there, is it was not you.
Hmm.
Like
Hmm.
you've just got to know
Hmm. Hmm.
because you'll probably be taking more responsibility for yourself than you should.
Hmm.
Those
And
situations.
we find that, and we find this with a lot of survivors. Like they think it's them. And it's really interesting. One of my clients had this, she did this movie and she created it. It was a flip gender movie where the male was the victim, and it was like constantly having to explain all the things that happened over and over and over again because that victim was not, believed. And I think that is a really, really important thing, is especially those victims that it happened to, is to know that it wasn't their fault,
Yeah.
right? It wasn't their fault. No matter what your stupid ass mom says,
Yeah.
we'll do this for our period. No matter what your stupid ass mom says, it wasn't your fault. So I appreciate the time that you gave me today, Spirit Bird, and the grace that you gave me to cancel on Friday because it just didn't feel like the right vibe. So I appreciate that.
Well, I'm so glad that you honored your needs and your nervous
Yeah,
system. Coincidentally, it worked out perfect for me too.
perfect. Well, that was it. Maybe I had an intuition.
Yeah,
Maybe I just felt it. So I appreciate your time. And
such a
in our show
pleasure.
notes, we're going to put like how to get a hold of you, how to work with you, and do all that stuff. But thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Such a pleasure to be here with you. Thanks for having me.
Definitely. Thank you for listening to the Beyond Mommy Dearest podcast. You're not broken, you adapted. Healing from a narcissistic mother is real, possible, and you never have to do it with shame. I'm your host, Nolani Pearl Hernandez, and until next time, take gentle care of yourself.
Your skin is a part of your nervous system, and taking care of it is essential to overall balance. Our products are specifically formulated to nourish your skin and bring it closer to homeostasis with every use. Start feeling better in your body today with the Happy Cannabis.